Are you ready for some football? We have the Soul Reapers versus the Bigfoots. Dan starts the match off with 3 straight points before a nice dodge by George breaks the streak. Chris gets a point off a serve and then a second on a return. Lex gets the Bigfoots on the board, and George is able to make it 2 in a row before a catch by Chris, who had the most catches in a full game with almost 15. So look out for that. Lots of catches. George is able to return it off the Bigfoots to secure the narrow lead. He would score another before another catch by Chris, who would return it for another point before scoring yet again to get the lead back to 3. Sarah extends that lead to 4 before Lex gets a score. He would get the next point as well on a controversial call that was correct as seen here. He would make it 3 in a row and get the Soul Reaper lead down to 1. Dan would score a point before a secured shot that George is able to return for the point. Another point by George ties the game at 9 before a Soul Reaper catch that Chris returns to retake the lead. After being quiet all game, Alex would score 3 in a row before a Soul Reaper catch. The ball would go back and forth before Sarah narrows the gap, putting the score at 12-11. Close game. Sarah would narrowly miss the next shot, giving Bigfoots a chance to finish the match. Lex serves it, and none of the Soul Reaper players can secure it. First match goes to Bigfoots. Match 2 begins with a return point for Chris. Dan is able to secure one next before a great rapid return by George. George was the best player for Bigfoots on this day, the only one of their players to score more points than get scored off of them. Chris can't secure Alex's shot, and the game gets tied at 2. He's able to score another before barely missing. Four straight points here for Chris before Miguel almost is able to sit without falling on his ass. I just read what they wrote for me. George's shot is secured by Dan, who just barely nips George's shoulder for the point. George with a nice rapid return that's secured by Soul Reapers, who send it back to the Bigfoots, and Alex cannot get his return shot to work on the artificial turf. Dan scores a point before Alex secures the ball, and his return works this time for the point. Another catch by Chris, and he returns it for the point. The ball will go back and forth before another slick move by George to score the point. Lex will get one and then almost rapid return Sarah's shot, but it misses Dan and Sarah gets the point. Dan would get the ball and not give it up, scoring the final 3 points, giving the match win to the Soul Reapers. George starts off the deciding match 3 with 3 straight points. The Soul Reapers are able to catch his 4th serve, however, and Chris returns it for the point. George makes a ridiculous attempt to save the ball but can't, and Dan scores a point as well as the next one to tie the game at 3. George's agile moves continue, and fortunately for him the ball hits the ground, giving Chris the point. He would score 2 more before catching Lex's shot. His return is also caught, and Lex scores off Sarah. The ball would go back and forth here before George scores again. Lex ties the game at 6, but his next shot is secured by Chris, who returns it to retake the lead. Sarah scores one, but her next shot is caught by Alex and returned for the point off Sarah as she used her arm to keep the ball in play. That's a no-no. Chris makes the catch and is able to score on the return before Dan once again closes out the game, this time with 4 straight points. The balanced attack from the Soul Reapers' 2 offensive threats, Chris and Dan, carried them to their first victory of the season. Chris led all players with 17 points, and Dan was just 1 behind him with 16.